Hello, everybody. Welcome to Innovation Roots Studio. I'm your host, Noopur, and today I'm really excited to have Jutta Eckstein with us for an amazing discussion. And let me tell you a little bit about Jutta. She works as an independent coach, consultant, and a trainer, and she has helped many teams and organizations worldwide to make an agile transition. Welcome, Jutta. Welcome to this discussion.
Thank you, Nupur, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm equally excited, Jutta. So, Jutta, just to begin with, can you briefly introduce yourself?
As I said, I work as a coach consultant. I'm also an author speaker. So I have written, I don't know, like 5 books or something like that. I'm in the Agile field. Sometimes it feels like forever. So I learned about extreme programming back in '97 from Kent Beck. And at this time, I was also working as a programmer, and I moved on to more, well, first to design and architecture, but then more helping teams. And now it's really more about helping organizations to be agile in a holistic sense, really, as a whole company, and implement agility here.
Thank you, Jutta. Jutta, since we are talking about agility, communication plays an important role in it. And according to you, how important is it to improve the communication structure of a team?
Well, actually, if you look at it, when do teams or individuals or whole organizations have problems, then what you could always say, it's actually never a technology problem. So the problem never lies in the technology. It's always about communication. It's really kind of funny that you are asking that, because with my partner together, we thought about having like a joint internet appearance. When was that? I guess like 20 years ago. And we were thinking about what could be a good name, and we decided for IT communication. Actually, I'm not using that much anymore, but it still exists and is around, and so we are both with that. And we decided on that because we thought, well, especially in IT, we often think that technology is the real issue, but really what it comes down to is communication. So even if you have any kind of technical problems, you can always solve them with communication. So you most often figure out that, well, there's the interface between 2 teams is not really good enough because they're not collaborating close enough, or also within the whole organization, or even across organizations. So I would think communication is really key to everything we are doing, which comprehends a lot of stuff. For example, it comprehends like, how transparent are we with what's really at stake right now? Are we able to deal with conflicts and negotiate around those conflicts? How can we make decisions that everyone really feels I'm part of that decision, or is it more somebody decides over my head about stuff, so, and therefore I don't have a buy-in into it. So communication has to deal with so many things, really, and therefore it also has this huge impact if it's not working.
True that. Jutta, what is your view on using retrospectives for organizational change?
Well, maybe you can imagine that I really love that question. And it starts with that it allows me to do a tiny little bit of marketing, because I wrote a little book about that, which is called Retrospectives for Organizational Change. And the thing for me with retrospectives, as well, how we all know them, it is a team together going through a sprint, and then we reflect on how was that sprint and what can we do in order to prepare in a better way for the next upcoming sprint, which is great. And I love doing that. However, that's not the only way how we can use retrospectives. And let me maybe first start with perhaps a minor thing, well, which isn't so minor, but if you think about introducing Agile to a team, most often what's happening is that people introduce it by sending somebody there who gives a training and tells people, oh, look, this is how it works. And the signal that I always feel is sent there is, well, whatever you have done before is actually not right. You did it wrong. And I know better how it should be done, how you should work on creating the product you're creating. And so this is how it works. And then I explain Scrum or whatever I explain, Kanban, what the people want. Yet, again, and what I said, it's the wrong signal. So what's way better is working with the team and finding out what has worked for them so far, and therefore what do they want to keep, and what hasn't worked, and they need to change, and what has missing, and so needs to be added, and what's kind of confusing and maybe difficult for them. So we have to pay attention to when we define our own process, which is then Agile per se, because it's working with the people. So the team decides on what's helping us and what's hindering us. So basically what I'm just laid out here is starting with a retrospective, use all the learnings from the people and use that to come up with the process. And so at the kind of very beginning, I said like, well, this is maybe a minor example, but it's not so minor because it's about introducing agility to a team. And now, well, I don't like the term scaling it up. I just wanted to say, but okay, stick with it. Scaling it up or expanding it to an organization. If we talk about organizational change, it's exactly the same thing. So it's first learning from all the different perspectives. What situation do we have at hand? And what's our hypothesis actually about what would happen if we make any kind of change? So that learning is happening jointly. And then we decide on our next actions, just like we do on a team retrospective, right? The main difference here is that the people who work on organizational change, they probably are not a team, but they all bring their experience, and that experience is so valuable, and we shouldn't really ignore it, but work with it. And coming back to how I started with like, it's sending the wrong signal. By starting with a retrospective, you send the signal that, well, what you did before is actually valuable, and we don't want to ignore that experience that you're bringing to the table. And actually just the opposite. We want to work with that experience and really want to make it happen, that our change, the organizational change, will stick, and we all have the buy-in, and we are changing in the direction that's helpful for all of us. So it is starting with a retrospective for organizational change, or using that, it's way more inclusive. So it's because it brings all the perspectives together.
Um, I think it would not be wrong to call it one of the initial steps towards the change.
Yes, yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Judah, it would be great if you can share your experiences on how to foster an agile environment by supporting top and middle management.
Well, very often what we see is if a team starts working in an agile way, then I see that two things are happening. Like, one of the things is the team is very successful, and then the remainder of the organization is looking at it and saying like, oh, can we learn from that? Maybe we should do this at other places at the organization, that agile stuff. And the other thing that I see happening, and probably you as well, is that the team is, well, kind of successful, but always faces some challenges because the organization isn't agile enough. And so the benefit isn't as big as it could be, because the organization or the environment around the team doesn't allow the team to really benefit from the stuff that Agile would provide to them, which clearly says, well, if the support in the organization for Agile, and more important probably the understanding what it is and how it can help us, is if this is not there, then it's tough for a team, but also for the whole organization to really profit from the advantages Agile brings. Now, having said that, that's probably more important now than ever. And hopefully people understand it also now better than they did maybe 2 years ago. Because the times we are living in are, well, surprise, surprise, you probably have heard this over and over again and also told others about it. These are the VUCA times. So we are living in times that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And people like you and me, we are talking about that for a long time, but very often I felt, well, people didn't really understand. Well, it sounds like, okay, yeah, things are changing, we know that, but more or less we are doing the same thing that we did forever. But now with the pandemic, actually, if you think, just for example, in 2019, by the end of 2019, companies have finalized their budgets and they put a lot of effort into coming up and defining their budgets for 2020. But then at latest in March, they realized, well, all that time spent for finalizing the budget was actually wasted. And this is such a strong thing, kind of really understanding that VUCA time, because we cannot really plan a year in advance. Things are changing, and hopefully not always as extreme as the pandemic. It really is a tough change, and that's not what we want, of course. But it clearly shows the times we are in, and that we have continuously to reflect, adapt, respond, act, being flexible, being fast, being nimble, all of that. And this has to be done also by top and middle management, because otherwise we cannot deal with those times. A team by itself doesn't have the power to really leverage or answer all those challenges that VUCA provides. It's, if the company wants to survive in a good way, then it's really everyone, and definitely the people who are who are in power. They need to be aware of that.
Right, right. So, the next question I personally am exploring and would like to understand from you how agility can be leveraged to make the world a better environmental, social, and economic place.
Well, Nupur, you are really great here, prepared. So this is another of my favorite questions and favorite topics. It's actually the area I'm exploring right now the most. And well, first of all, I think this is probably the most important problem we are facing right now. So, and the points you made, like environmental, social, and economic, these are actually what's also called the three pillars of sustainability, or it's called the triple bottom line. So it all together is called sustainability. So sustainability looks at, like, from the environmental perspective, how can we protect and save our planet? From the social perspective, how can we aim at ending poverty? And from the economic perspective as well, that how can we ensure that everyone has the possibility to thrive and thrive, like everywhere, everyone. And so it's also an inclusive kind of thing. I sometimes feel the economic part is maybe the thing that's the most often forgotten for sustainability, because it sounds already, well, there are also those other terms for environmental, social, and economic, which is well, the order is normally different: people, planet, profit. And profit sounds just so maybe traditional. We always wanted to make profit, But from a sustainable perspective, it means for an individual and also for a company that in that sense, profit means never at the cost of somebody else, never at the cost of a different company, of a different nation, of a different individual. So, and therefore having the chances more equally laid out for everyone. So now back to your question, how can Agile leverage that? So on the one hand, the vision of both the Scrum Alliance and the Agile Alliance have actually sustainable in their statement. So they say like they want to ensure that we have a more sustainable work life or something. I'm pretty sure at the time they came up with that, they more thought about things like sustainable pace, or maybe they thought about making Agile sustainable in an organization. But what we really need to do now is looking at how can we in the Agile field actually help making sustainability happen in terms of environmental, social, and economic. And if you look at the Agile principles, that I just co-created with Claudia Melo a workshop around that, where we jointly look at the principles and see if we can explore them under the lens of sustainability, then all of a sudden completely different questions pop up. For example, if you think about frequent delivery, well, maybe what we should do here from an environmental perspective, also checking what is actually the carbon footprint of the software that we are creating. Or also, it could be things like how much energy is actually consumed if the system is in idle mode, even if it's not used. Or are the features that we are developing really used, and are they maybe forcing our clients to upgrade their hardware and therefore creating e-waste? Or would it also run on an older hardware and therefore people can use the systems way longer? Or we can also look at from a social perspective also, are we really including everyone? Is it usable for people with disabilities? Can it do harm to people who are in the minority? So there are so many questions that all of a sudden are opening up, and I think Agile can be used really to help. Well, on the one hand, keeping those questions in mind with the way how we are working, and also helping answering those. And then just in overall, in general, Agile has been also created, or is a great way, what we all found out, to deal with complexity, because it brings down to, well, inspecting and adapting, just trying one thing and then learning from it and maybe correcting it and do the next thing. And this is exactly what's needed also for making the world a better environmental, social, economic place.
Thank you, Jutta. That was really great to hear. And along with, I'm also exploring this side of the Agile's capability. And my next question is kind of a follow-up of this question, Jutta. What can we do to increase the awareness of sustainability in the Agile community? Because you and I are talking about it right now. How can we keep this discussion going within the community and we make a more sustainable system?
Yeah, well, actually, what we are doing right now, this is one way of increasing that awareness, I think. And this is being aware of a problem, and also that we have a stake in that, is the absolute first step for being able to make a difference. And maybe just one thing for for people to understand, because very often I have the impression people think, well, we are in IT, and maybe even specifically if we are, well, most of us who are listening here, I assume are in software, but I'm not 100% sure. But in software, we often feel like mm, it's it's not our thing. We are kind of at the good side because like what we are doing right now, software enables us to have that interview without, for example, me traveling to Mumbai or you coming to Germany. So we don't have that huge carbon footprint for travel because the software allows us just to do that, right? However, if you look at the forecast of energy consumption, so there are different forecasts mapped out, but one of the forecasts says by the year 2030, which is in 9 years, it's not long, right? That it might well be that IT actually consumes 21% of the overall energy consumption. So we do have also a huge impact on that. So what do we do about this? Do we ensure that we really reach those 21%, or do we ensure that it will be less, it will be fewer, that we will not consume that much? And so knowing about that is of the major part of, yeah, increasing the awareness. And then that other thing, what we started talking about already in that other question, and this is what I try to do right now, is also going to conferences with that topic. And I know there are a few more people who are talking about this, and with all of that, like that interview, conferences, well, writing as well. So I also have a blog, and together with Claudia, we have written a chapter on the topic for a book. So writing, speaking, listening. So this is all what we can do to increase the awareness. And then additionally, well, showing that we can actually do something, and the do something is what I referred to beforehand. Well, how we create the products, maybe we should really ask different questions around the products in order to understand what we can actually do. What is the difference? So like measuring the energy consumption, or maybe a more perhaps even basic thing. Most of the software that we are writing right now is software that's hosted or running in the cloud. And the cloud isn't just nowhere, it is somewhere. There's a data center provider at one place, and the data centers, they use a lot of energy. And most often, teams, companies decide on a host for their cloud based on, well, the price, the technological features, and all of that. But I have hardly seen that anyone asked that question, oh, maybe we should also look at the energy consumption or how the energy is provided. And just using this as an example, the cloud provider who is used the most, which is AWS, so Amazon, they're running completely on fossil fuel, versus one that's much smaller, Google. So for hosting, I mean, it's much smaller. They are actually already at carbon neutral area, because they're running their data centers on solar and wind. So they use regenerative energy. And I'm not saying with that that whatever Google is doing is great, right? It's just my point is we should also ask that question and then make a more informed decision. Whom do we want to run it with, and then what impact does it have to the world? And the thing is, at this moment, most often we don't even start asking that question. So I just think we need to talk more about it so that we all, yeah, start asking deeper questions. And this what we are doing right now is really a great thing. It's a great start of doing that.
I hope the same, Jutta, that we are able to put the communication across about the sustainability, and this conversation is taken forward by people after watching this. So, Judah, before we conclude this discussion, what is your one message for our viewers?
Huh. I'm not sure. You ask so deep questions, and I feel they are really all at the core. So and at the core what I am super passionate about. Um, Thinking of that, probably for all kinds of change that we are facing or having to do or being aware of, I think very often we kind of jump to any conclusions and actions way too soon. And what's often missing is the reflection part. So, um, yeah, first start to reflect on what's the actual situation, and that we understand that, and then coming up with a hypothesis for our next step. And then for that next step, we should also, well, ensure how we can prove, validate, invalidate the hypothesis that we had, so we can really consciously learn and then make a more informed decision about our over next step once we have done the next one, right? So reflection is, I guess, also for sustainability, but really for all kinds of changes, probably should be more at the core of what we're doing.
Thank you, Juta. That was amazing. And I'm really happy that we could speak about a lot of things, right from significance of communication to build a team, to importance of retrospective when we talk about organizational change, and what kind of role agile plays in making a world better place in terms of environmental, social, and economic terms, and about increasing awareness of sustainability. So thank you so much, Judah, for joining this discussion, and we hope for more such enriching discussions with you. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, again, great questions. Thank you.